What? Bail out now, Serpentor. You've got 5 seconds. You will suffer for this. Look, it's Serpentor.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We will be taking a look right now. Hello, everybody. Hebro77 here, and today we are going to take a look at the animated series that supposedly killed G.I. Joe. But the question is, was the DIC series as bad as everyone let on? Now, I will say this at the very opening of the show. Yes, it was bad. It was really bad. But was it as bad as we all remembered? We're going to be taking a look at that and a whole lot more here today on the Hebro channel. So stay tuned as we dig into this cartoon that supposedly killed the G.I. Joe series. Now, as everybody knows, the cartoon takes place directly after the 1987 G.I. Joe the movie, which was based off of Cobra Law. We all know the famous catchphrase, Cobra la 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 la, in which Cobra Commander was turned into, well, a snake. And so this DIC series was a continuation of that very movie and didn't really emphasize enough on the original series, which was done by Sunbow. And everyone praises Sunbow and says, oh, that's the greatest G.I. Joe series that was ever put out. And I couldn't agree more. But today we're not going to focus on Sunbow. Today we're going to take a look at the series that supposedly drowned G.I. Joe. And then we have our fantastic start with this logo, which you all remember probably from the real Ghostbusters. This was supposedly the original intro for G.I. Joe as the DIC series shines and gleam as they were taking a cue from the original series. And there's what Cobra Commander would shortly soon turn into. Let's take a look at some of our famous clips from the DIC animated series. An international, highly trained military specialty. Now you have the original voices there. Let's see here, hold on. This is what we got later, of course. Well, let's just say this one didn't go over too well with the fans. Was it catchy? Catchy, maybe, yes. Was it as good as the original? No. Which begs the question, why the change? I mean, when you go from this, to this, there's a huge difference there. Here is the very first episode that supposedly took place after the events of the 1987 Cobra Law G.I. Joe movie. And as you can see, they introduced this character and the Baroness. Now here's the problem that I had with this series. You see people like sudden character changes like Lowlight and Lady J, but now it looks here that the Baroness pretty much stayed the same. And we see Cobra Commander as a snake emerge from the pod, and somehow the Baroness was able to do this through a machine of some sort. And witchcraft, I guess? I don't know, but look at this. Caveman carvings, maybe from Cobra Law, I assume. That headdress there looks like something from Cobra Law, but didn't they use bugs and reptiles what is this stuff? Now, I've got to admit, I really like this first episode. And when you look at the first episode and the episodes going forward, you realize that the cartoons started suddenly declining. And now we've got the Baroness wearing this contraction, which looks more like something that would go on Skeletor. So maybe they were ripping off Masters of the Universe or something. Because if you got to remember, at this time, the New Adventures of He-Man started as well. So what is going on here? Does that not look exactly like Skeletor, whose castle just happens to be called Snake Mountain? Now, there's the famous lines, "Othered was once a man, was once a man." And I've got to say that in the movie, that was probably one of my favorite lines. Not so much that it was a good line, but so much it was just so cheesy. Him saying it over and over again. And that asp that he has. And in the next episode, we see this happen. You can see that they've captured all the planes, and now we get another one of the most interesting characters that became an action figure, which was Scoop. And at first, as you see here, he is very much so a bad guy. And now we see Cobra Commander making all these planes into the Python Patrol. I thought this was a pretty good episode, as we did get toys for the Python Patrol around this time in 1990 or 89, 90, whatever. It just, from here on out, things tend to get a mite bit weird, and I believe that after this is when they changed the beginning music to the show. But this right here, this is good stuff. This is good, cool stuff. I like it a lot. We see Crocmaster. There's another new character that didn't exist in the original series. And there's another great action figure, Cobra Commander, which originally was intended to be a Crimson Guard dressed up like Cobra Commander, supposedly, and then he got killed, and then that's when this Cobra Commander took the costume. Now, from here on out, folks, it just gets weird. And here is another cartoon that I found particularly good. I do not like the redesigns on some of the characters, as I mentioned before. I don't like Slice. I didn't like this version of Storm Shadow. But a lot of people do seem to enjoy this version of Storm Shadow. But we're here today to find out, was the animated series as bad as everyone says it is? Well, for the most part, I'd say yes. But we did finally eventually get a Cobra Commander that was another hooded version of Cobra Commander. And this hooded version of Cobra Commander, you see more of his eye area, the eyebrows and stuff like that. Now, does that look like the Cobra Commander that was in the movie with the 3 eyes going across the top of his forehead? Now, take into account that yes, it was a genetically mutated version of Cobra Commander, but does that look anything like a snake to you people? I say no. In all, I would say that the series really isn't as bad as everyone makes it out to be. I would say it's more or less just an extended toy commercial for the next line that was coming out from the late 80s into the early 90s. And as we look deeper into the 90s, you see that there's the neon colors, there's overly exaggerated features, there's really, and then they started the whole Ninja the whole ninja themed G.I. Joes. They were all suddenly becoming ninjas. That to me is when the series started taking an awful turn for the worst. Now initially when they started out, it to me, I really enjoyed this show. I enjoy the I enjoyed the return of Cobra Commander. I enjoyed him in the new outfit. And if anything, the show did bring us some pretty cool toys. It's just that by 1989 or 1990, I was a little bit too old to be collecting toys. Although, I will say that I was collecting the Ninja Turtles. And even as I was collecting the Ninja Turtles, I think I might have been around 13 or 14 years old or something like that. And I was a little bit too old to be collecting all the Ninja Turtles. But I did have a friend who collected the Ninja Turtles secretly and had all these Ninja Turtles, like the Turtle Blimp and the van, all the turtles, the Sewer King, or Rat King I should say. Sewer King, that's Batman. That's something totally different entirely. But anyway, and that's another thing that could have very well killed the franchise as well. Because you had newer, different cartoons coming out, like Ninja Turtles and newer Transformer cartoons. And of course, a lot of people say that the Transformers movie was also indirectly responsible for the killing of G.I. Joe, which is kind of weird because it was the same. It was Sunbow who had done the Transformer cartoons and the G.I. Joe cartoons. So why is one competitive company competing against another company? It wasn't until G.I. Joe had switched to D.I.C. I keep saying Dick. Well, I guess they are dicks. But anyway, D.I.C., when it changed to D.I.C., they were then directly competing against G.I. Joe. So it was Transformers versus G.I. Joe. Well, as you can see, Transformers is still going, and it's still going strong thanks to the Michael Bay movies. And until G.I. Joe gets a decent movie or another incarnation of some kind, the series is pretty much dead. Did the D.I.C. series kill it? No, I don't think so, because it continued well into the 90s and even the 2000s. And even more so did the comic books. In fact, the comic books in the early 2000s, mid-2000s, had a revival of a whole new set of G.I. Joe comic books, and there was a whole new series of action figures. We had the 25th anniversary G.I. Joes. We had the 50th anniversary G.I. Joes. We had the reissued G.I. Joes, and there was still quite a bit of the 90 Joes. The 1990, the D.I.C. series G.I. Joe figures were getting renewed as well. And I particularly liked the silver Cobra Commander because when it came out, that was the first and only Cobra Commander that I had when I was a kid, because I didn't get a whole lot of Millway figures, and I was not aware, because the card backs that I always got never said anything about here's how you get your Millway Cobra Commander figure. And I don't know if that's because the area where I live, it just wasn't as well known. And in fact, I didn't realize that Duke and Cobra Commander were Millway figures until the internet. And it was over the internet that I learned that these were Millway figures. So I had no chance getting them as a kid. As a kid, General Hawk was the main leader of G.I. Joe for me. And the silver Cobra Commander was the leader of Cobra. And I didn't really have a whole lot of Cobras. I did have a few of the, I guess, 1983 figures, because I had some of the vehicles that were out for that year, which included the mobile tank, which came with Steeler. I think he might have been the only well, we say vintage now, but the only older from the original first few G.I. Joes. I had Steeler, and maybe because I had the Bridge Layer, I had Toe Booth, and I think those are the only ones that were around 83, 84, maybe 85. But the rest of them, like Dusty, Shipwreck, General Hawk, Roadblock, Letterneck, Mainframe, Dial Tone, all those Joes were from the 87 toy line. Beachhead, and those are the ones that I grew up with. Those are the ones I was able to collect, because I wasn't able to collect a whole lot of the older ones. And about the only Cobra I had was the Cobra Stinger driver, and that was the only, I think that was a 1984 vehicle, the Stinger. So naturally, I had the driver, which came with the Stinger. And I think that was one of the only Cobras that I had that wasn't from the 1987, 1988 era Cobras. And the other Cobra vehicle I had was like the Cobra Worm and stuff like that. And all those Cobras and all of the other G.I. Joes didn't show up in any media forms except for DIC. The DIC series is the one where they were in media form, and when I was younger I hadn't collected any of the G.I. Joe comic books, so I had no idea. And I think another reason why I hadn't really been totally into G.I. Joe, because I was also into He-Man, and He-Man came out in 84 and 85, and I collected a lot of the He-Man figures. My first two He-Man figures were He-Man and Skeletor, and I think that's around the time G.I. Joe was at its height, but I was more into Masters of the Universe back then than I was in the G.I. Joe. Having said that, G.I. Joe was my favorite action figure collection, because when I was collecting the He-Man figures, I couldn't get my hands on a whole lot of He-Man figures, but I did have enough of them where I could have little Epic Wars, and I had Castle Grayskull, I had Snake Mountain, the Slime Pit, stuff like that. But getting back to G.I. Joe, the main thing that killed G.I. Joe was not the DIC series. There's an even worse series that came out late 90s, early 2000s, I guess, which was G.I. Joe Extreme. And I really truly believe that it was G.I. Joe Extreme that kind of killed the series. Now, the DIC series had awesome G.I. Joes, like Heavy Duty, Silver Cobra Commander, some new Dreadnoks like Heavy Metal, and what was the one that I showed you on there? That was another new Dreadnok. I can't think of his name offhand right now. But anyway, that was just a short video of what I thought about the DIC series. I don't think that it killed the franchise. I think that lack of interest in newer cartoons, like I said, like Ninja Turtles and Silverhawks and newer Transformer cartoons, I think that those were the downfall of the series. Now, of course, Sunbow was done by the time the movie had ended, and there was a lot of kids coming out of that era, and now the kids were a little older, especially the ones that were born in the 80s. The ones that were born in the 80s were more reminiscent of the 1990s G.I. Joes, which had the more neon colors and weird ninja suits and weird play sets and stuff like that, like worms and creatures. And it was more creature based in the 90s than it was in the 80s. It was creature-based and sci-fi. Sci-fi had then taken over. The military aspect of it was gone. It wasn't completely gone, but I think it had faded out quite a bit. And that also had a lot to do with killing the series. Now, how would the series have been better? Well, it would have been better if Sunbow would have picked it up, of course, but I think that the G.I. Joe movie, had they done the G.I. Joe movie right, then we probably would have gotten a lot better series. Now, I mentioned the 3 or 4 episodes that I liked about the D.I.C series. I mentioned those 3 or 4 episodes. The Return of Cobra Commander, the Python Patrol episode. There was some Sergeant Slaughter episodes that I really liked because I liked that they continued the continuation of Sergeant Slaughter. There was Serpentor Trapped. We saw the Iron Grenadiers. We saw the Iron Grenadiers, and they were awesome. When I was a little kid, I used to think the Iron Grenadiers were called the Iron Grenaders. I don't know. But anyway, that was just a video of me giving my opinions and my thoughts. If you didn't like the D.I.C series, then yeah, you had plenty of reason not to like it. If you grew up around the D.I.C series and that's all you had, then your opinions, of course, are going to be way different. Now, was it a horrible series? No, not really. There was a lot of really good episodes, and like I said, we did get a lot of really good figures out of it. But was it as horrible? Was it a good series? No, absolutely not. It was not a good series at all. But I would recommend would I recommend watching it? Yes, I'd recommend it simply for the fact there's a lot of really cool episodes. You know, you got a few diamonds in the rough that if you go over it and look at it. Now, would I recommend watching every single episode? No. Go through and look through it and give it a second look, because I think that we underestimated the just, I won't say quality. Was it bad quality? Yes. But there was a lot of really good storylines. In fact, there was a lot better storylines in the D.I.C series than there was in some of the cartoons in the Sunbow series. There was some really bad episodes in that Sunbow series, and we never talk about those, which might be the next show that I do. I'll talk about the really bad episodes of the Sunbow series. That would be kind of cool. All the clips I used in today's show were not mine. I did not make them. I'm not the original creator. I hope that YouTube does not take it down on the clips I showed, because I think I did show an awful lot of clips, but at the same time I did talk while they were playing. Now the music, I don't know, they could probably take it down for the music, but anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this show. It was a retrospect on G.I. Joe the D.I.C series. I gave you my reason why I thought it wasn't as bad as what people make it out to be. And so if you enjoyed the show, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down. Why not? And don't forget to click the subscribe button and hit that bell button for notifications for more G.I. Joe or even He-Man toy reviews, which I do on this show mostly. I do G.I. Joe toy reviews, but I'm going to start doing the He-Man toy reviews, and for that I'll have a different shirt on. But anyway, until next time, this is Hebro77 saying good night and good luck. And Yo Joe!